Welcome to today's session. We're going to do things a little bit differently for the next couple of sessions. I'm going to interview some projection mappers from around the world about how they got into projection mapping, what kind of work they make, and any advice they can give you guys during your projection mapping journey. Today we're talking to Jasper Lisergic. Jasper is based in Amsterdam and he's a projection mapper and musician. Let's have a listen to the interview.
I live in Amsterdam or
Okay,
near Amsterdam. Yeah.
sure. So what time is it where you are? Is it 8 p.m.?
Let me check. It's now 10. Yeah.
10
In the
p.m. Okay,
evening.
so you're 1 hour in front of me then.
Yeah. You're in England then, I guess.
Yes, I'm in the UK. So
So
um,
whereabouts in the UK?
I'm in Yorkshire, so just outside of Leeds.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So that's a pretty nifty setup you've got behind you.
Yeah, it's my modular system. I use this a lot as well for visuals, but
Uh-huh.
also for music composition, and it's
Sure.
my quarantine project basically.
Okay.
Pretty deep
Well,
rabbit hole.
sure. Well, let's dive in it. So, Jasper, can you tell me a little bit about who you are then and what you do?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, obviously my name is Jasper. I grew up in the Netherlands. I started working around or studied around 12 years ago sound and audio engineering in Amsterdam, and started volunteering in a variety of clubs in this area. And already back then there was this or at least the owners of the clubs wanted, if you were interested, that you would do both sound and light, which back then I was like, sure, I can do both. I ended up not being able to do both, but then I got more and more into the visual aspects of parties, but also the creative aspect of creating visuals, and working with projectors. I
Mhm.
spent 4 years then in Vancouver working for Clark's audiovisual, big company in Canada. And we would do a lot of projection mappings on buildings in the public space.
Mhm.
And that was very focused towards either corporate interests and needs and like marketing purposes. And when I came back to Amsterdam, I kind of continued doing this projection mappings in the public space, only more towards the creative side, to create political awareness around certain subjects, a bit guerrilla style, going with a generator and a big projector to whatever building I could find in the city and just project on it.
Sure.
So I've been doing this for the last couple of years with a group of friends in and around Amsterdam, and yeah, obviously I'm really into music. So I'm for the last few years been trying to find a one-to-one combination between sound and visuals, because whenever I was doing visuals in the club, I was most of the times one step behind, or I wanted to have something happening every time there was a snare hit or
Uh-huh.
whatever. And with a modular system and connecting this, or at least sending a MIDI output, I can do it one to one, and there is no latency. So that's what I'm
Yeah.
learning and discovering now. But work dried up here, well, everywhere actually.
Yeah.
So I'm reinventing myself a little bit, and I now do a lot of projection mappings for the retail business.
Right.
So from restaurants just projecting their menus whenever they launch a new menu, but also in the shopping streets, I project on dresses or new clothes or
Mhm.
cars when they're released, stuff like this. And it's not particularly my interest, but yeah, I need to make ends meet. So
Sure.
that's
And
where
and I
I'm at
think
now.
and I think projection mapping is one of those really interesting kind of hybrid art forms where you can have kind of high art, but also you can commercialize that and make money from it as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and I think it's a logical result of growing up in kind of a digital age. We have way more tools at our disposal to be creative, and people do spend a lot of time in a virtual space on their computers. And there's a lot of tools for us to be creative on a computer. And maybe like 5 to 10 years ago, a lot of people, for example, my parents would look down on this and say like, yeah, you shouldn't spend so much time on there, just go outside, play, or make a drawing or whatever. But I
Yeah.
was already doing that inside of a computer. And yeah, now it's getting more and more accepted. And also yeah, you can make a living from it, which is really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, no, no, absolutely. So what software do you use when you're mapping then?
um Yeah, I started off using, for example, Blender and
Yeah.
Cinema 4D because I was a complete novice. I would recreate everything by the centimeter, what's in the physical space. And then I didn't understand anything from cameras and focal lengths. So I would just position a camera where my actual beamer was. But
Mhm.
yeah, and I ended up using Resolume to project everything and to
Sure.
do the final touches. um, and nowadays I'm primarily using Resolume in combination with Touch Designer.
Yeah.
I'm discovering S modes at the moment. That's
Okay.
what I'm getting into a little bit now. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, sure, sure. So I've played with Resolume and I've not quite got my head around it yet. So I'm using MadMapper. Um,
Yeah. Still
and
on my bucket list.
yeah, well, MadMapper was the reason I use it. It was a friend of mine who I learned projection mapping from. Initially, used it, so it's one of those wonderful things of the first person I encountered using projection mapping used this software. So I kind of immediately was drawn to learn that software really. But
Yeah.
it's on my bucket list, and I've experimented with software called Heavy M as well.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
which is really interesting because it's really intuitive and it's really simple and you get really interesting results quite quickly. But
Yeah.
but it's also very limiting.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
In,
Yeah, I also like this that there is now more and more of a variety of software which you can create stuff in, not only for projection mapping, but um, I think it becomes, at least for me, it becomes interesting when you try to either combine or because every piece of software more or less has its pros and cons, basically.
yeah,
And for example, Touch Designer is really abstract, and it's hard to get anything that resembles any thing we actually know from the real world.
hmm,
But if you combine that into to Resolume, for example, as well as what I do, it's easier to get very lush images, which
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
But yeah, with MapMapper as well, it's mapping 3D objects becomes way easier than, for
Yeah,
example, with Touch Designer. Yeah.
yeah. I've started learning Touch Designer this year, and I've I've just got my head around the node-based system. So I started my career as a filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
So I still make lots of film, and I switched from Adobe to DaVinci Resolve this year, which is node based. And actually, that gave
Mm-hmm.
me a really good grounding to start learning Touch Designer because I instantly understood the interface.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when I was previously trying to learn it last year, it just kind of I was really struggling with kind of going from a linear based editing system to a node based design
Mm-hmm.
system.
Yeah.
Um, but I think it's definitely worth people kind of learning more than one proprietary software, really, because it just
Yeah.
makes it much more adaptable, doesn't it? Um,
Yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
it's yeah. The other side is as well. If you know a little bit of a lot, then still you don't know quite much. So it's good
mm,
to just spend your time with one piece of software and really seeing where the limits and the boundaries are. And from
yeah,
that, you will figure out like, okay, this is what I'm missing. This is what I need. And then you'll progress into yeah, a different piece of software that might complement this. And
yeah, no,
coincidentally, let me check if I have it here. I should have a box. Well, a friend of mine dropped off this piece of gear um, that was kickstarted a year ago to see if we could sell it. I'm gonna get it.
Sure.
Give me a sec. I keep forgetting the name, but yeah. So we were seeing how we could
Is this
place.
the light form?
Yeah, this is
Yes,
the box.
I have one.
Yeah,
I
light
have one.
form.
Yeah, I have a light
Okay.
form. Yeah, it's
So
really.
I've been playing around with it for 2 days now, and I am deeply disappointed, but also
Yeah.
pleasantly surprised. But
Yeah.
if
You've
you have
just.
some creative skills with for example with After Effects, then yeah, you can really make awesome things in it, and especially for retail core businesses, this yeah, it's quite interesting.
You've absolutely summed up my experience with it as well. I was so excited when I saw the Kickstarter, and I immediately kind of bought it. And I got the second wave, not the first wave, and it came maybe 6 months ago, and I was so excited. It was like Christmas, and then I kind of opened it, played with it, and within kind of a couple of hours, I was going, "Oh, it's not what I thought it was."
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it feels like almost like a how-to kit for me.
Yeah.
In that sense,
definitely.
So, if what advice would you give to anybody that wanted to kind of get into projection mapping?
Oh, that's a tough question, because for me, I have experienced a lot of people that are into either VJing or projection mapping with a variety of reasons. And it depends if you want to do it artistically or you're really looking to make money. And I think both, or the combination, is actually very feasible. And I would say less is more, especially in the beginning. Don't try to if you have, for example, a beamer on a building, don't try to fill in the whole building. Try to accentuate what is already there.
Yeah.
And slowly go from there.
Sure.
Because at least I'm never trying to recreate a new world. I'm always trying to make what is there a little bit more interesting. But I've seen people doing it here in the form of protests and demonstration. For example, around the whole Black Lives Matter protest, there's people that go with their projectors and shine on police buildings or project on police buildings, and it gains a lot of attention. So I think it's good to see what's happening in the world around you, and whatever interests you, and take that as a source of inspiration.
Yeah.
And use the public space to make people aware of what projection mapping is, because most people are still clueless about this, because you find it in clubs and maybe at some art shows or galleries. And there isn't a whole lot of there's YouTube, of course, but the source of information is still pretty scarce. And I think and what I did, for example, like learning cinema 4D, I was watching videos on the internet and just redoing every step I was seeing, and it wasn't particularly my interest, but it did end up giving me a lot of knowledge that was actually useful later on.
Yeah, sure. And actually, that's why I've done this beginner's guide to MadMapper course, really, because when I was learning, like the videos, that they're so bad and they're so robotic, and that you just kind of go like, this is driving me insane. I just need somebody kind of in plain language just to say to me, oh, that's what an asset is. Oh, that's what a quad is. Oh, that's how I connect that to the beats per minute.
And that's amazing that you're doing this, and it's really necessary. It's also a bit like how we used to learn, for example, carpentry decades ago. You would go with somebody and he would tell you step by step, like, I'm doing this for this reason. And now you can have it in the virtual space, but it's basically the same thing that you need. And really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess I just have one final question, Jasper, really. So kind of what project are you most proud of and why?
Ooh, um, that's also a tough one. Um, because I think it's twofold. I think my proudest moment was a few weeks ago when I finally got my modular system working with Touch Designer one to one, because that's what I've been looking for so long, and then it works and it happens, and then I'm like, ah, fuck, this is magic. And
Mhm.
um, but that's just a personal goal, and I think one of my best moments, I guess, was around one uh, yeah 1 year ago when we were doing a projection on uh, the central station in Amsterdam,
Mhm.
and we were flashing or showing videos of there was this demonstration in the north of the US regarding a pipeline that was being made, and we were projecting basically what was going on there and a little bit of the history the of Donald Trump in the US, and the some camps with children, etc. I won't get too political, but we were projecting this. The police asked us to stop doing this, and the public said like, no, we want to watch, and we ended up having a few hundred people watching it. And
Wow.
in this way, yeah, we created awareness, and I think this showed me how powerful of a tool it can be. And yeah, it's also useful for that.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's also one of the amazing things for me about projection mapping is there isn't just one way to do it. It's about, like you said earlier, finding your interest, kind of
Yeah,
pursuing that, and it might be political, or it might be for the art, or it might even just be commercial.
yeah,
But
yeah,
actually, it's using kind of this projection mapping ethos to kind of to relay
yeah.
that, and I think that's really
Yeah,
great.
with painting you're limited to the canvas you have, and with projection mapping you're limited to the objects in the world
Mm,
around you, which yeah, there's so many untouched things. Yeah,
yeah.
it's like a harmless form of graffiti. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I guess, and then finally, how can where can people check out your work? Where can people connect with you?
Well, I'm mostly for my music. I'm on SoundCloud,
Yeah.
and we're launching a new page for our commercial side of things, which is called Glitter for Products. But that's really focused on businesses, and so that might, for the creative person, be not that interesting. Um, and for in regard to combining modular with touch designer, I'm still figuring it out. Not
Sure.
going to publish anything yet. Yeah.
Sure. And we met on social media, didn't we? We met on the projection mapping
Yeah.
forum on
I'm also quite active there. Yeah.
yeah.
So
So
if
I'm
anything happens, yeah,
yeah. So people could kind of request to join that and have conversations with you and so on.
of course. Yeah. Yeah.
Perfect. Jasper, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Um,
Cheers. Yeah.
and
And thank you what you're doing.
oh, thank you, and I'm sure I'll speak to you very soon.
Cheers.
Right, take
Have a good
care.
evening.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.